Hello. Thank you for coming to Emotional Intelligent Leadership in a Pandemic. It's great to have you here. So, if you got yourself a drink and some food, let's sort of move in and start learning about how Wargaming Sydney dealt with the pandemic. So, this is a case study, and to do this, the way I'm addressing it is we'll start with an introduction. What is emotional intelligence? And then from that, what was Wargaming's people first mantra? How do we really apply that to become that core? Following on, we'll look at how we use that to serve ourselves during the pandemic, what happened when it started, how we dealt with those first moments in the pandemic. Afterwards, we'll start looking at how this is starting to be our new normal. So how do we start adapting to this new way of working, and how do we start thriving in it? Finally, I'll start looking at our future plans, so how we're intending to move forward, and also what our key lessons we learned, things you can sort of take away now from this talk, and start applying to your own studios, your own office environments, how you can use emotional intelligence to help you be better. I guess first, a little bit about myself. So my name is Aidan Millett. I'm an expert product manager. I've been working at Wargaming Sydney for 6 years, but all up I've been in the Australian games industry and working in games for 14 years. I started my career as an engineer, but I've always sort of had a bit of a talent and interest in production. And through most of that 14 years, I've been working in production. I started at Oran, where I worked on products like trains, and then moved to Half Brick, where I was able to work on titles like Fruit Ninja and Jetpack Joyride. And that was an amazing experience. But after that, I was moved into Wargaming Sydney, in which I've mainly been focusing on project and product management and sort of working on titles like Tank Commander mode for World of Tanks console, as well as many other internal products. One of the things that I guess has been unique about my career is I actually had a period of time where I worked remotely. So before the pandemic, I had those times and those experiences, and I was able to really bring that knowledge to this new situation where we all had to start working remotely, to be able to share that and support people going through that. So that's sort of why this topic matters to me. But let's first look at what is emotional intelligence. So, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your own and others' emotions and how they really drive behavior. You want to really be able to use that knowledge and that understanding to really help motivate others and also create greater teamwork. And really, having good emotional intelligence is part of creating a really happy, healthy, and effective work environment for a team. So, obviously, you can see that emotional intelligence really helps teams and teamwork. It can really help build a culture within a studio. But one of the really important things that emotional intelligence does is it really allows people to adapt to change. Because you're thinking about how people respond to things and how it affects them, you're always looking at when a change is coming, how the people are affected, not why the change is there, but how you make people more effective and better through it. And generally, because of this, you'll find that businesses that have strong emotional intelligence and leaders who exhibit this are generally one step ahead of others. But let's look at it in a practical example about what it means to Wargaming Sydney. Like, what does it mean to us? I asked a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people in the studio, and I was asking, what do you think this means? And there was this common theme that came around is that we value our talent, and they are the powerhouse that creates our things. They create our great things. This is really important because it's not the studio, it's not our products, it's our people, and our people are that core. And the other one that sort of when people are raising it is when we make decisions, the needs of our people are always important to those decisions. We're always thinking for new projects that are coming up or initiatives we're trying to start. What are the needs of the people? Why it matters to them? Why do they care? And by really living this value, by looking at how we use our staff effectively, how we help support them, how we really empower them, we can make sure that they're proud of us and the place they work. And we don't just do this for people who are hired, we really try to apply this to all stages of someone's journey. So we try to apply this from hiring. So when we put out a job description, we make sure we put a lot of thought into how it's worded. We try to make sure we have a lot of empathy through our recruitment process, really trying to make sure it's effective and really living the values that we believe in. We have a diverse pitches on our job ads as well. We want to make sure that we are showcasing what we value and how we want to be. In our hiring process, culture becomes an important part of the filtering. We are hiring people who believe in our values. We want to make sure we get diverse opinions. We are bringing in diversity, but we also want to make sure that with everyone we bring in, they have our core values at heart. And that's what's really important. We take on projects and we start initiatives that really matter to people. We are investing in the right areas and that people feel proud of that. We also want to make sure that we're investing in people as a business outcome. People are always growing and always getting better. And part of this is we also want to make sure that our managers are effective as well. And we're investing in them to be better managers. Quite often in gaming, we find people just sort of grow into management roles because they're very effective. And that's the next step in their career. But what that sometimes means is they didn't get that formal training on how to be an effective manager. So I want to make sure that our ones were provided training in terms of what is best practices in terms of expectations. How do you do good expectation setting? How do you do best practice feedback? How do you provide recognition feedback for great work and making sure that's effective and felt by everyone of the receiver, more importantly. But also we're looking at how do you deal when you need to have conflict and how do you do that effectively to make sure that you're able to progress through it and be better afterwards. We know that it's going to happen. People will want to move on and find new challenges in their life. But when they leave, we want to make sure they leave as ambassadors. They always remember their time in Wargaming Sydney as good and that they felt supported. We want them talking about Wargaming Sydney as this is what we used to do here, or these are the great initiatives that they ran and you should be running too. It's really important to us that when people go on to their next challenge, that they do leave as ambassadors. So what were some of the things that we were able to do? We wanted to take pride in our work. You can see down the bottom, in the bottom left here, we have our playtest lab that's all set up. We have all these people playing our games and testing them out for us. Feel pride. They want to come. They want to provide that feedback. They want to get engaged. And they feel that sense. They want to share it with others, friends and family. We provide space for innovation. It's not just all about our project work, but what our next project work is going to be. What are our next opportunities? We actually give everyone a chance, an opportunity and space to make sure we're able to do that. We do this by having internal hackathons called hackups. We also provide 10% time for people to invest here. We invest in diversity group to make sure that we are improving and looking at how we can be more diverse and how we bring those more opinions in to make sure we're not blindsided. We are capitalizing on everyone's knowledge. In terms of the other initiatives that matter, we want to make sure that social responsibility is there. People want to feel that they're proud of the place they work in, not just for the work, but also what they believe in and what they do outside of the work. Things that we've done in this area may be small, like just changing the coffee we use to a ethically sourced coffee bean, but we've also done others, like initiatives where we converted our electricity to 100% renewable. We're not carbon neutral yet, but we are looking at ways to start getting there. We're able to share knowledge back. And we did this through starting up a meetups group. We were able to start inviting others to talk, but also have our staff share knowledge as well and create a bit of a community around game development. We also provided studio lunches. This was a great opportunity for everyone to get together, discuss what's been going on in their projects, in their life, and just to sit down together at one time. Another initiative that we had that was really great and really leading on that, people leave as ambassadors, is we had an alumni meeting where once a year we would invite people back who had left and just have a get together, catch up, see how things are going, how their life is, and then I'll just catch up with old faces and meet new faces. It was a really great way of making sure we kept that family feel even after people had left. They always felt part of the Wargaming Sydney family. Obviously, what this talk is about is how do we take all that? How do we take this? How do we value people and then apply this when the pandemic hit? So when we started, obviously everyone, like everyone else, we went remote. And after the first week, we went from 2% of our staff being remote to nearly 100% of our staff in 1 week. A really core aspect of this was it was mainly self-managed, but heavily orchestrated with help from IT and project management departments. We needed to make sure people were able to work effectively remotely, and they were able to tell us what they needed, and they were able to self-organize for how they got equipment home or set up at home. We also had a whole bunch of people starting to take on ad hoc initiatives to really try rebuild some of these connections that now we weren't in the office together. They were setting up morning chats for coffees and things like that, just really trying to build in these connection points. One of the other big call-outs was we started to get a really big increase in communication channels. There were things around how COVID is going, where current cases were, but also how you can set your office up, how do you set your home environment up, what is your home environment, what are your best practices. It was a really great tool for being able to share this knowledge. And we had our managers coming in and reaching out to other wargaming studios to find out what was their best practices, what were they doing, what were they learning. We wanted to make sure we were bringing the best knowledge we could and best practices to everyone so they could feel effective and supportive. Because it was incredibly stressful for all. We also started having other ones around parenting, because obviously now your children were at home, we were able to support them with that. We also provided tools for how you can actually talk to your children about COVID, because obviously there were these big changes, and we had some great booklets and all that as well that was supplied to be able to sort of how you can introduce it, how do you talk to your children about it. We allowed people to take home office equipment. This was desks, this was chairs, this was PCs, monitors, whatever it was going to take to make you more effective at home. We would let you take it home, and we even supplied Ubers so you could take it out there, or alternatively, we had a lot of people organizing carpooling. We actually had one of our staff who lives on an island. He had his PC delivered by boat by one of our IT department, just to really make sure they could be effective. It was really important. It was amazing to see how everyone came together to support each other during this time. The other thing was we made sure there was an in-office roster. We had a senior manager, admin, IT in every day. So if you did have any issues or concerns, you could always come in and see them if you needed to. We also meant that if you had things like PCs that needed to be restarted, you had people you could reach out to make that happen. So after 1 week, obviously incredibly stressful, but people were feeling very good about the fact that we went from 2% to 100% and people felt effective working from home, that they could actually do it. And then we start looking at, now we're a month in, and some of the things that we were doing at this point in time, we were creating a lot of remote survival guides. How do you be the most effective you can working from home? These were really important. These were around meeting etiquette, instant messaging protocols. How do you work with different time zones while being remote? How do you set your office ergonomics? All these types of things. What is the best way to work remotely? What lessons had people learnt? And these were shared in a common place. And we kept trying to build it. It became a living document as people learnt new things or new discoveries around tips and tricks for parenting or updates on vaccines. We shared them in these areas. We also went an extra mile to try and make sure people were effective. And this was really important. We found special VPN routers that enabled dev kits to connect to our servers. And this was really important because when people were working on consoles, we needed them to be effective and feel effective working from home. And if you're trying to remote desktop into a console to play it remotely, it just wasn't the same experience, and we weren't able to effectively iterate. So this was a really big thing to make our staff more effective, and they felt valued from it. We were able to set up remote desktop tools, not just remote desktop, but things like Parsec that were better and more effective, lower lag times. We hooked them into our playtest lab, so people who did working on laptops would be able to do playtests. We tried to set up dual PCs where we could so people could take advantage of incredible builds in the office when needed, but also be able to work on home PCs without needing to remote desktop. We also upgraded staff internet and provided mobile dongles if they needed them, because we just moved to home very quickly and they weren't set up to be able to do so. One of the things that all came from this and was really important to us when we were looking at it, we wanted to add a studio goal, and it became important to us is that this is a learning experience. This is highly stressful, but there's a lot we can learn working remotely. But people are more talking about how do you survive the pandemic. Well, we want to change that to more a mindset of how do we be better after the pandemic? How do we take this opportunity, find the best out of it, and maybe change our work afterwards? But we want to make sure that we're better in post-COVID world than we were beforehand. We didn't just survive it, we thrived in it. And this was really important to us. So we made this a studio goal. After 3 months, we were starting to see that this was not going away. So we wanted to start looking at what are the positives and negatives about working from home. So one of the things that we were seeing in terms of positive is people were really enjoying the more family time and the greater flexibility in working. These were really impactful for people. The other most interesting one was people really felt that they were getting a lot more focused time. Even with the distraction that may be around the house, they were finding in the office they were getting interrupted anyway. And this more focused time, this quieter time, really allowed for some deep thinking work. And because of this, they were feeling more productive as well. And that was really good to see that even though they were working from home in this stressful environment, people were actually feeling more productive. And that studio goal of we want to thrive through COVID, we were saying, well, yeah, we are starting to see some of this. But obviously, we had a whole bunch of areas we still needed to work on. We were having a lot of concerns about what's the certainty of the future, right? Are we going to be working from home for the next month? Are we going to be working from home for the next 3 months? There was just uncertainty, and people weren't able to really invest in a home office setup. So they were making do. We had a lot of challenges with onboarding new starters. How do we get machines out to them? How much should we get out to them knowing that they'll come back when they're coming back to the office? Those types of things. So, and also, how do they meet people? How do we introduce them to the studio? These became challenges we needed to solve and get better at. We needed to increase our cross-team communication. We were finding that teams within themselves were communicating great, but those little idle chit-chats that were happening around the studio were sort of being lost now. Well, obviously, we had, with work being brought home, there's this opportunity for work to bleed into home life a lot more. And we need to make sure we're addressing that to make sure people weren't burning out. Because the last thing we want is someone to burn out from working from home. We want to make sure it's sustainable for them going forward. We wanted to make sure we were planning the impacts of homeschooling. We were seeing that there was a lot more happening with this, so we wanted to make sure that we could plan how homeschooling is going to impact our schedules, because we want to make sure people feel supported. They should be able to do that. That is an important thing. Their family is important, and more important than work. As such, it's like, how do we make these situations work? How do we provide the opportunity for people to do that and not feel guilty? And that was really important to us. Lastly, we sort of noticed that we weren't able to do any studio activities anymore being remote, and we were starting to lose a little bit of the studio's identity because we couldn't be together and have those moments and that sort of collaborative culture that we just really fostered within the studio. So we're looking at these sort of things, and one of the really, really big ones, one of the most important ones we wanted to address was this uncertainty about the future. So we made a call for stability, right? We wanted to give people some real clarity around where we were going, why. So in July 2020, we made the call that we are going to work from home and support 100% work from home until June 2021. This gave people almost a year to know I can invest in my home office setup because I can do this, and we will be doing this for a year. This was really, really valuable and really, really important to people. This showed that management was listening to them. They were really looking at those fears and those concerns, and they actively went around making sure people felt that they had been heard and understood. We'd done the research, and we were able to provide that stability for them and that ability to invest. But obviously, now that we were going to be working from home a lot more, there are some other areas we need to make sure we're looking at. So as I was talking about before, the work-life balance, we need to make sure that people were okay, we weren't burning out. So we made mental health a big focus. We appointed a mental health officer in the studio who was there to help support people and support managers to identify it. We also made sure that work-life balance was important. We encouraged managers to showcase best practices, and our senior managers were really, really good about this, making sure they were calling out when they were taking those moments and those times. We were able to provide, if you were getting vaccinations, you can take a day off because of we believe it's important. So we encourage people to say, look, I'm taking the day off to get my vaccinations. We also encouraged managers to do "Are you okay?" check-ins. We wanted to make sure when they were catching up with reports and anyone, just making sure they're okay. How are they dealing with the pandemic? How are they coping? It was really important, and we actually incorporated this into a lot of our production meetings. And this was really, really great. It showed this massive culture of support. Everyone cared. But we also provided professional counselling if people needed it. These are extreme times and extreme circumstances. So we wanted to make sure people were supported if they wanted it. So we provided numbers they could call, and we even set up a special program so that people would be supported through this, and they could either call anonymously or come forward if they wanted to get that support. And we're also offering a lot of parenting support in this time as well. How are parents coping and what they can do to be more effective? But at the end of the day, we are in this together. We want to succeed together. As such, we were looking at how we support that in a maintainable way, so we could be sustainable going forward. Another core area here was trust and flexibility. We needed to trust that everyone was doing their best, and we did. Everyone was there, and we always knew that people were doing their best. We were really trying to focus on our business outcomes and really supporting employees to do it. It was really important for us to define what we wanted to get done and then really leave it to the teams and the employees for how they got to do it. Because we all knew that people were going to be working different hours and different ways. So it was really on teams to help sort out how they could achieve it. Everyone had different work from home environments, so we needed to make sure we were trusting that they were working effectively, but also that we were flexible in terms of if you have children running in on a meeting and start asking you questions, that you can do that. Your family is important and the most important thing. One of the other really big things we found is everyone's needs are different. So you need to make sure you're dealing with people on those individual levels. And and we've found that there is no single solution that's going to work for everybody. So when you're looking at these sort of things, be flexible in sort of your solutions. You'll have some solutions that'll work for groups, and then you might need to also look at some individuals as well. Another big aspect we were really trying to focus on is how do we keep connected? We had really built this really awesome culture where everyone knew everyone and it was a really high energy in the office. But now we're remote, you were losing a lot of that. So we were creating a lot of announcement channels to make sure people are up to date with what's going on, but also where they could find new information or what had been happening around the studio. We used to do our birthdays sort of at our town hall meetings or our all hand meetings, but we actually moved this to a special channel. So you could see when birthdays and who had a birthday and say happy birthday to them on the day rather than when we find out on the Fridays. And the whole point of that was to have cake, which we weren't doing anymore. We also started creating a lot of interest groups, parenting groups, gardening groups, pet chat groups. And these became a really great way of having people connect. We really focused on our sort of touch points, our common touch points. So we had our town hall, which is every fortnight, which is a big studio update. And our senior managers were there like, you can come ask us questions. We had a lot of Ask Me Anythings during these times, really trying to create those moments. We also had our Monday announcements, and this is where we sort of give an update on the work coming up over the next week, just to sort of give people an understanding of what's happening. But the other aspect here is we started incorporating just little facts and tidbits around the people presenting each week. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite video game? Just creating those personal moments and connections. We made sure our production schedules were updated and communicated out. We need to make sure that we were very clear that our production schedules were the things that can move or change a little bit because our people are the things we need to support. Obviously, all our partners were very, very accepting of this during the time. because everyone was going through it. But it was really important to us to make sure it was very clear that we weren't able to and we weren't going to commit to what we had committed to. We were going to be changing our expectations because we needed to and because we didn't want to burn people out. Lastly, we want to make sure we're actually applying really good tools and best practices for working remotely. There's nothing worse than sort of having all these extra channels and then just being filled with text and conversations you can't follow. So we were encouraging people to work in having conversations in threads, providing good statuses so you can understand if people were at their desk or at their computer or not, but also encouraging people to use actual face, like your pictures of yourself as avatars so people understand what you look like and things like that. Just using these best practices for working remotely helps you build better connections. And that's the important thing here. Our culture was a lot around these connections, and we really wanted to make sure that we were able to maintain them. As this, we had to sort of rebrand our culture a little bit. And the aspect we went for is the saying, together apart. We are together, that was what our culture was. We're just currently apart. And some of the things we did with this is we sent out gift packages to everyone. The first one was just a simple one with a mask and hand sanitizer in it. Things were a little bit difficult to get and it was a concern, but it actually mattered a lot to people that we cared, we gave them. And I still use my Wargaming mask when I go out now. It's something I'm actually very proud of in the company that we were able to do that. We also had a second gift package that came out that was a bigger one that had a little bit more swag in it. But the other thing it really had in it was some really cryptic puzzles. And these puzzles create these amazing shared experiences where people are trying to work out, what is this thing? How do I solve it? So it was a really nice experience together and created some of these great channels and discussions and very, very crazy theories about what things could be. But yeah, these created these together moments apart. We created Discord channels for gaming and chats, and these became really good ways of having quick ad hoc conversations with people or getting people together, have a coffee in the morning, or I want to go play this game, doing play tests. And these became, and gaming, we all love games, it's great. So we had a lot of gaming sessions where we were able to really look at just getting people together and play. We also had a Friday stream where people who had cared about a particular game would share their experience and how they play, and it was really great. We had some food and beverage tasting events where we were able to sit down, have a tea or coffee all together with sample packs and sort of talk about them and be walked through how do you make good tea and what's important. Some of the other things in terms of initiatives were sort of like looking at fitness challenges people were calling out that now that they're working remotely and from home, their fitness had gone down. So we put some fitness challenges out there to really try and encourage people and support them to achieve those goals. Lastly, we wanted to sort of have people be able to share pictures of their workspace, their pets, their families, just to help really create that culture that we are in this together, even though we're apart. So you can have people who are just proud of their pets, as you can see on the bottom left, or how the fitness challenge was affecting their pets, or how their pets were just distracting them from work. But it really became some great talking points and really creating some of these moments in the day where you can just say, oh, that's really cool. I love that. And really building that culture of togetherness. And we found that because we were able to provide these areas, people were actually starting to able to engage a lot more and be able to share a lot more and build those connections to be more effective. And what we saw a high impact of this over the year. So this is our employee engagement survey, and the areas that we were sort of focused on in terms of this emotional intelligence, how they were impacted over this time when we were working remote. So this is our employee engagement survey from 2019 to 2020. As you see, our engagement went up, our company confidence went up, our alignment and involvement went up, our enablement went up. Like these are things that people were really feeling. Now that we're working remotely, you would sort of think that people might lose that alignment because they're not in that connection or they might not feel enabled. But we're actually finding because we had invested in people, because we had really made that emotional intelligence as part of our leadership, it's like, no, we want to make sure that you have these feelings, that we are addressing them as they're coming up and dealing with them. And as such, we can also see that our leadership, people got a lot more faith and thought our leadership was better. We also saw our work-life balance. People, even though working remotely and work could bleed into our home life, we're actually finding people thought that was better too. And one of the ones that had the biggest improvement was actually action. People thought over this phase we were much better at taking action, which was really great to see. So a lot of these initiatives, a lot of these things that we had been doing, really focusing on people and how they can be effective and how they can work effectively, listening to them, actually resulted in a much more engaged company. We were actually thriving through this pandemic. So what does the future look like then for us? So we're obviously going to be working hybrid like most other people will be. But one of the big things for us, and that is how much time in the office and then how much time at home. The other really big question for us is, why would you be in the office? Why do you want to get that value? So we needed to start looking at what is the office for? And when we're talking to people and seeing how people were using it, we're starting to see, well, the really big things here are collaboration, right? We see people who want to get together, discuss difficult problems, and having sitting down around a whiteboard, having discussions, and sort of having even sometimes passionate discussions where you're able to sort of make sure that you're focusing on the solution. These are much more, or really only effective when you are together. When you're over Teams or Skype and things like that, when you're on video calls, it can be really hard to be passionate. As such, we find the office is much better for that. The other one that it's really good for in terms of collaboration is planning and getting alignment on where you're going. So we really want to make sure that those things in the office are much easier and much better. In terms of it as well, the other thing we find from the office that people are calling out is building relationships, just seeing other people from other teams that you don't normally talk to. They're passing by, you say hi. When I was in the office, this is what I would spend a lot of my time doing. I would get a lot less work done in those days, but I would be able to catch up, find out how people are going, people I'd worked with in the past, how their family, their children are going, and sort of catch ups that I just wouldn't do over Skype or Slack. I would just be sort of using this opportunity now when I'm in the office to make sure I'm building that, meet new people, people I had never met before. This became a great spot to do that. So as we're starting to look at it, we started to go, okay, what can we use the office for? And because of these things, what we noticed is the office doesn't necessarily have to be a place where you go to do work. What we're looking more at is the office is a place where you go to collaborate. It is where you go to work with other people. It's where you go to have that social experience for work, and not necessarily always be the place where you go to actually do the work. And this means that as we're looking at it, we're going to make a much bigger effort in terms of looking at our office, our fit outs and things like that, on how to be more effective in terms of making that a collaborative space. But that's what we're sort of looking at going forward, and how we capitalize on that, and how we really keep benefiting from this work from home experience, how we've and applying these lessons that we've learned. But I guess the key aspect here is, what are some of these lessons, and how do they work? So one of the things for us is building a supportive and inclusive company culture really enabled us to excel during this pandemic. And it's really important that it's supportive, because it's not just management saying it needed to be done. And as I was saying, when we went from 2% to 100% of remote staff, it was a supportive culture. It was mainly self-managed. There was a bit of orchestration and getting the right people to talk together, but it was self-managed in the actual execution. And by being inclusive, you're allowing people to make sure they bring up these things and bring up these ideas. They don't feel like they're going to be shut down. And these are really core and important to make sure you're able to survive and actually show that you have an emotional, intelligent leadership, is the fact that you can see these in your culture. You can lead with trust. This was one of our biggest things. When we started going remote, it's just trust everyone is doing the right thing. There was never a doubt that people would be taking advantage or anything like that. It was just, we've hired people, we know that their values are. As such, we know they are doing everything they possibly can to succeed here. And this is really important. This is one of our key aspects that we learned, is that you've got to make sure you do this. Some of the other businesses that we saw, we could see and hear from people that we knew, is like, we could see there was this sort of mistrust. Are people doing the right thing? As managers, how do you know people are doing the right thing? The idea is, you don't need to know exactly what they're doing. You focus on the business outcomes and what the output is, and then you just you trust them. It's like, they're going to do it. They're going to achieve it. If they say it's going to be done at this time, it's going to be done. those types of things. You focus on people and how you can support them. You really look at what are their needs, how can they be better, what is stressing them out right now, and how you can address that. We find that obviously being remote can be hard. You can get frustrations and misalignment, but you got to make sure you're on top of those and really focus on how people are interacting. And isolation hits everyone in very different ways. And this is sort of similar to where you're focusing on people. And generally, there isn't a solution that's going to fix things for everybody. Parents with kids have a lot less time over a day than obviously people who don't. But people who don't might not feel comfortable really bringing up how they're feeling in terms of isolation because they can see what isolation is doing to others. So you really need to make sure that you're looking at for all the different styles of isolation and also how you can address them, how you can make sure you are bringing those things in and dealing with them. One of the most interesting ones that I saw through this was I could see at certain points when isolation was hitting people, because generally in just a daily stand-up, their tone became a little bit different, or they might be a little bit shorter with people. So we were able to start seeing some of those impacts and to be able to start calling them out and addressing them and discussing them as a team or with individuals as required. It's really important to build some together time. You got to make sure you have those moments when people can come together and understand that your culture is important and you're creating these moments to have those discussions, meet those people, not obviously together, but at least in a call or a group call, and share important information so everyone has those shared experiences. It's really, really important to make sure you help build a good culture. Work-life separation is really, really important. You know, make sure you support people and give them tools to make sure how they can turn off and really get that great balance there. Another one is watch for meeting fatigue. A lot of these communication channels and all that meant having a lot more meetings, and especially for people who probably didn't have a lot before. And you've got to make sure you're really careful that with this, you're not getting to that point where you're getting to a meeting fatigue and people aren't really there. They've checked out. They're just checking other things on other screens. So make sure you don't book too many meetings. You have effective meetings. And sometimes you might be able to encourage people, look, if you're finding this, book periods of time where you don't have meetings. You're just going to block it out, not to be disturbed, so you can get some work done. It's really important to make sure you look at these types of things to make sure people are effective, but also that they feel supported and they can actually say, you know what, I don't want meetings. It's important they can raise it. Lastly here, make sure you're really using instant messaging best practices. And this is really important because it helps set expectations both ways. People can know what you look like and things like that if you use the avatars. But also, like if you're saying, I'm away, I'm going for a run, I'm having lunch, people know you're not at your desk. It's the same as if you're in the office and you go, look, oh, they're not there right now, I'll come back later. Or I've sent a message, they haven't replied. Why haven't they replied? Oh, they're out right now. Even if it sounded important to you, but you have that feedback and that information. Keeping conversations in threads makes it much easier to follow when someone comes back later. So these are really, really important things to do. So what can you take away now? What can you learn from this and start applying yourself? First thing is start with hiring. Look at how you're approaching hiring, but also how culture applies to it. Make sure as part of your hiring process, you make culture fit an important part. Again, as I've said before, you want to make sure diversity, you're getting diversity in opinions and diversity in people, but you want to make sure they align with your core values as well. So that way you can lead with trust, which is the next point here. If you have people that you have those core value alignment with, you know you can lead with trust, and you will just be able to succeed because you know they're doing the right thing. Create a feedback-rich culture so you're able to celebrate your successes, but also deal with your problems and make sure you can work through them constructively and effectively. It's really, really important, and it's amazing what it does. We spent a fair bit of time making sure feedback was important to us. And if you look into best practices feedback around recognition feedback, improvement feedback, and conflict resolution, you'll be able to really see how this can improve your cultures. Focus on how you make people effective and look at what are best practices. But the key aspect here is don't focus too much on what the output is. It's how do you make them as effective as possible, and really look at their individual circumstances, but also as a team and as a studio, as a culture. How do you make people more effective, feel more comfortable, understand their concerns, their stresses, but also what helps them be effective. Lastly, try focus on your business outcomes being achieved. So what do you need as a business? And then let the teams really focus on how they do that, how they orchestrate themselves to achieve those business goals. So these are some things that you can really start doing now. So yeah, I hope this has been really helpful. I hope you've had a good time. And what I want to really leave you with here is one final thought. And this is from our studio manager, Steve Wang, when I was asking around, what is our people first mantra? What does it mean to you? And what have you learned? And he's like, look, from this, hire great people, right? Set clear value driven expectations and have complete trust as a baseline. And if you do this, people will not only do the right thing, they will bring you brilliance that you've never even thought of. Oh, this is a really nice way of summing up what this means to us and sort of how we survived, and not only survived, but thrived through this pandemic. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat.